This rusty, crude piece of scrap is blocking the display of my VIP resort. Smash it to pieces and throw it out. The arrogant contractor, veins bulging on his forehead, slammed his steel-toed leather boot into the intricately forged iron gate. A deafening metallic crash echoed through the shop. Grace cried out in desperation. Her hands, stained with soot and covered in fresh burn blisters, scrambled forward to protect the last remaining decorative panel. This wasn't just a lifeless block of metal. This was her sick father's medication money for the month. The man currently lying breathless in the back room. In that exact moment of cruelty and despair, from the dark, smoke-filled corner of the forge, a single father stepped forward silently. He didn't yell. He didn't raise a fist. He just calmly placed a solid gold casting trophy, bearing the radiant royal crest of Geneva, onto the stained wooden table. Hello, friends. Rough iron and stone must endure thousands of degrees in the furnace and brave the fiercest storms to transform into magnificent, breathtaking masterpieces. In the exact same way, a pure, devoted heart is always cherished and warmed by God's hands. If you choose to hold on to your noble self-worth, leave this affirmation in the comments below. I believe God always tempers my heart through the red fire to become a priceless treasure. Subscribe to our channel today, and let's step into a story that will bring tears to your eyes, about the absolute miracle of human kindness. To understand how Grace ended up weeping over her shattered masterpiece, we have to go back. Grace wasn't born to live in the lap of luxury. For the 25 years of her life, the most familiar scent she knew was the sharp, acrid smell of ozone when a welding rod sparked to life, mixed with the salty sting of sweat dripping onto glowing red steel anvils. But God, when taking away the comfort of a complete family and handing her a father battling a severe illness, compensated her with a very strange, almost magical gift, a sense of hearing that went far beyond the boundaries of an ordinary human. Grace could hear the heartbeat of metal. Just by lightly tapping a small hammer against a cold steel bar, she knew exactly whether its internal microscopic structure was tense or loose, brittle or flexible. Thanks to that God-given talent, Grace never created a flawed product. She specialized in hand-forging safety iron curtains and protective frames for isolated orphanages out in the wild suburbs. Grace's iron frames never had sharp edges. They curved and flowed as softly as silk ribbons, yet were resilient enough to withstand the impact of a light truck. Most importantly, they were absolutely safe for the tiny, wandering hands of orphaned children. But good intentions couldn't pay the mounting hospital bills. Vance, the biggest construction contractor in the region, was the only man willing to buy Grace's art to decorate his ultra-luxury real estate projects. He knew her talent intimately, yet he constantly weaponized her father's misery to ruthlessly drive down her prices. "Listen to me, you little brat," Vance had hissed just a few days prior, tossing a pathetic wad of crumpled bills onto her table. "I need 10 sets of gate frames in 3 days. Don't sit there listening to sounds and tapping your stupid hammers. Just weld them together blindly. Slap some glossy black paint on them. Those rich folks can't tell the difference anyway. You are 1 minute late, and I will throw you and your dying old man out into the street in the middle of winter." Grace had swallowed her tears and picked up those bills, one by one, but she refused to compromise her integrity. She stayed awake for 3 consecutive nights, her eyes bloodshot and tearing up from the harsh welding arcs, meticulously adjusting every single steel fold to achieve absolute acoustic perfection. That unwavering dedication unintentionally delayed her delivery schedule by half a day. And in that half day, destiny knocked on the door of her forge in a way no one could have ever anticipated. It was a blindingly white blizzard that afternoon. The temperature had plummeted to -10 degrees. The rotting wooden door of the blacksmith shop was suddenly blown open by the howling wind. A tall man, covered in a snow-drenched wool coat, burst inside, carrying a little girl about 7 years old in his arms. Their luxury SUV had broken down on the mountain pass just a few miles away. That man was Edward. Grace had no idea who he was. All she saw was a panicking father, and a little girl with hollow, empty eyes, shivering violently, and not just from the biting cold. Please let us warm up for a moment," Edward panted, holding onto his daughter tightly. Lily, Edward's daughter, suffered from severe functional depression and trauma, following a horrific psychological shock. For over a year, the little girl hadn't spoken a single word, hadn't smiled, hadn't cried. She was entirely unresponsive to any sound around her. Edward, a man who had the power to run an entire corporate empire, was completely helpless when it came to saving his own daughter's soul. Grace quickly grabbed her only thin blanket, wrapped it around the little girl, and pushed the glowing charcoal basins closer to them. But Lily just sat completely motionless, her eyes staring blankly into the flames. Occasionally, her tiny body would twitch in panic at the screeching sound of the wind outside. Grace looked at the little girl, her heart twisting in her chest. She knew exactly how terrifying that kind of silence could be. She paused her welding torch and walked over to the corner of the shop. Grace picked up a small, compact hammer, the kind used for chipping away rust. She walked over to the hanging rack of various sized alloy bars that she had painstakingly sorted using nothing but her hearing. Clink, a light tap rang out, as clear as a flowing stream. Lily blinked. Clink, clink. Grace tapped a bronze tin alloy bar, and the sound resonated deep and warm, like the rustling of autumn wind. She kept moving, her hands rhythmically striking the scrap metal, creating a wild, warm, and miraculous symphony right in the middle of the dilapidated forge. The sound of iron and steel was no longer dry and rigid. It was singing. It was resonating with the beat of a human heart. Lily's hollow eyes slowly began to change. The little girl gradually turned her head, staring intently at the tiny sparks dancing under the hammer of the soot-covered blacksmith. And then, a miracle happened. The corner of Lily's mouth twitched upward. A timid, fragile, yet incredibly bright smile broke across her face. The little girl reached out her freezing, tiny hand, wanting to touch the empty air, as if trying to catch those beautiful melodies. When that beautiful smile broke through the freezing cold of the forge, it felt like the sun itself had just risen inside that tiny, rundown room. If you believe in the warmth of human connection, please leave a comment saying, "I believe God always tempers my heart through the red fire to become a priceless treasure." Standing in the dark corner of the forge, Edward's eyes blurred with tears. He had spent millions of dollars on the world's top psychiatrists, taken his daughter all over the globe, but no one, absolutely no one, had been able to do what this poor girl had just done with a simple hammer and some scrap metal. He quietly observed Grace, and from the perspective of a world-leading expert in steel casting technology, Edward realized a shocking truth. The way this girl swung the hammer, the way she listened to the resonance of the metal before deciding to lower the welding temperature, that wasn't just the skill of a manual blacksmith. That was an innate instinct for physical metallurgy that even his most advanced AI robots in Switzerland couldn't calculate with such precision. Grace wasn't just making a gate frame. She was forging a super-material structure with her bare hands. But this peaceful and heartwarming scene wouldn't last long. "Are you kidding me, you little brat?" Vance roared, his alcohol-laced breath steaming in the freezing air. He kicked over a bucket of scrap, the loud crash making little Lily flinch and bury her face into her father's chest. "I gave you 3 days, and what do I find? You're playing hotel for a couple of freezing stray dogs, while my VIP resort is waiting for its main entrance." Grace stepped in front of the coal basin, instinctively shielding the little girl and the unfinished metalwork on the table. "I just need 4 more hours, Vance," Grace pleaded, her voice shaking, but her stance firm. "The storm is too heavy. The metal is cooling too fast. If I weld it now, the internal structure will snap under pressure. And these people needed shelter. I don't care about the structure. I care about my deadline." Vance grabbed a heavy, rusted crowbar, leaning against the anvil. Without a second of hesitation, he swung it down violently onto the intricately folded steel panel Grace had spent 72 hours perfecting. Crack. The beautiful, sweeping curves of metal dented and snapped. The specific acoustic tension Grace had painstakingly tuned was destroyed in a single, brutal second. "This rusty, crude piece of scrap is blocking the display of my VIP resort. Smash it to pieces and throw it out," Vance yelled to his thugs, repeating the very words that started our story. Grace fell to her knees, clutching the ruined metal, tears finally spilling over her soot-stained cheeks. Her father's medicine, her only lifeline. Gone. Now clean up this garbage. And get out of my shop by morning. Vance spat, turning on his heel. Actually, she won't be doing that. The voice was calm, unbelievably calm, but it carried a weight that froze the entire room, faster than the blizzard. Outside, Edward gently set Lily down on the wooden bench. He stepped out from the dim corner, the flickering firelight catching the sharp, authoritative lines of his jaw. He didn't look at Vance. Instead, Edward knelt next to Grace. He picked up the shattered piece of the steel alloy. He took the small hammer from Grace's trembling hand and tapped the broken edge. A dead, hollow sound echoed. Edward closed his eyes for a second, then stood up, facing the towering contractor. A standard low-carbon steel weld. Snaps at roughly 40,000 psi, Edward said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. But the acoustic resonance of this piece, before you ruined it, it indicated a micro-forged alloy, with a tensile strength exceeding 120,000 psi. She managed to realign the carbon grain structure, using sound wave resonance. By hand, in a freezing shack, Vance blinked, his thick brow furrowing. What kind of nerd garbage are you babbling about? Who the hell are you, buddy? Some homeless guy she picked up off the highway? Edward reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a sleek, obsidian black satellite phone. He didn't dial. He just pressed a single, glowing red button on the side. You said this gate was for a VIP resort, Edward continued, taking a slow step toward Vance. The Pinecrest Alpine Lodge, Property Sector 7. Is that correct? Vance's face drained of color. How? How do you know the project name? That's strictly confidential. Because I own it, right at this moment. When the truth is finally brought into the light, and true talent is defended, let's anchor our faith. If you believe that justice always finds its way, please comment. I believe God always tempers my heart through the red fire to become a priceless treasure. Before Vance could even process the words, the blinding headlights of 3 massive, armor-plated SUVs cut through the blizzard, pulling up right outside the broken door. 6 men in tactical winter gear stepped out, the logo of Sterling Swiss Industries emblazoned on their shoulders. The lead security officer rushed in, immediately scanning the room, before locking eyes with Edward. Mr. Sterling, sir. The GPS beacon activated. Are you and Lily all right? Vance stumbled backward, his heavy boots tripping over the scrap metal. His jaw hit the floor. Edward Sterling, the billionaire CEO of the largest industrial steel and architectural robotics conglomerate in the world. The man who practically owned half the real estate in the state. I'm fine, Marcus, Edward said, his eyes never leaving Vance's terrified face. But my contractor here seems to have a problem with quality control and basic human decency. Mr. Sterling. I had no idea, Vance stammered, holding his hands up, his arrogant demeanor completely evaporating into pathetic panic. This was all a misunderstanding. I was just pushing her to deliver the best for your resort. You don't recognize the best when it's sitting right in front of you, Edward said coldly. Marcus, cancel all active contracts with Vance Construction. Notify the state board of his coercive labor practices. I want him blacklisted from every commercial project in this country. By sunrise, escort him out of my sight. Vance tried to beg, tried to drop to his knees, but the security team was already dragging him out by the collar, tossing him into the freezing snow like the garbage he was. The forge went completely silent, save for the howling wind outside. Edward turned around. He looked at Grace, who was still sitting on the floor, utterly stunned, holding the broken metal. He walked over, knelt down again, and gently took the metal from her hands. What you did tonight, Grace, the way you used frequency to stabilize the alloy. My engineers in Geneva have been trying to crack that algorithm for 5 years, Edward said softly. But more importantly, he looked over at the bench. Lily had stood up. For the first time in a year, she walked on her own. She came over and wrapped her little arms around Grace's soot-covered neck, burying her face in her shoulder. Grace let out a choked sob, hugging the little girl back tightly. "You brought my world back to life," Edward whispered, his voice finally breaking. He didn't just offer her a job. Edward appraised her unique metallurgical acoustic technique at $1 million on the spot. He offered Grace the position of Supreme Chief of Design for his global architectural division. But this wasn't just a business transaction, it was the forging of a new life. 2 years later, the Pinecrest Resort opened its doors. The centerpiece of the entire estate was a magnificent, sweeping steel gate, coated in crushed crystal. It didn't just look beautiful. When the wind blew through the valleys, the gate sang, a soft, warm melody that echoed across the mountains. Standing in front of that gate, wearing a stunning white dress, was Grace. Beside her, holding her hand, was a healthy, laughing Lily, and a husband who looked at her like she was the most precious metal on earth. When that perfect, crystal-coated steel gate finally shines brightly to welcome the new lady of the house, let's celebrate her victory. Please comment. I believe God always tempers my heart through the red fire to become a priceless treasure. To send your blessings. Don't ever give up. When life throws you into the furnace, God always has a divine forge, ready to turn the struggles of an honest heart into the sweetest glory. Subscribe to our channel to warm your soul. And one last time, leave the comment. I believe God always tempers my heart through the red fire to become a priceless treasure. We will see you in the next story.